Good morning once again, and welcome to this continuing series by the Elephant that shares perspectives on the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic and its impact on Kenya economically, socially, and politically. And this morning, we're really pleased and honored to have with us Dr. Joy Mueni Kiiru of the University of Nairobi School of Economics. And good morning, Daktari.
Morning to you.
Before we start, Daktari, let me ask, how are you doing? What is lockdown like? Kenyans have been in lockdown since around March. What's it like for you? How are you? How's your family? What's it like at the university? What changes have you had to make?
Oh, thank you so much. Kenyans have been in lockdown since March, but actually the people who are said to be working at home mainly are the public servants.
Yes.
I, being a public servant, my lockdown, I'm literally working from home. All my lectures are online, or my supervision is online. And to be honest, all my research, applying for my whatever, is online and things like that. So everything for me, as a public servant, let me just make that distinction. As a public servant who lives on a paycheck,
Yes.
I'm working from home. But I'm seeing many other Kenyans who don't have that luxury of a paycheck. They
Yes.
cannot afford. In fact, you are seeing a lot of activity happening. But for public servants and for those in big organizations, are literally working from home. So my family and I, my children, we are working from home.
Okay.
School is closed, so we are full. We are household. We are full household. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Daktari, I wanted to ask from your perspective, from where you sit, we spent the first two months of the COVID-19 pandemic just sort of understanding it and talking a lot about the epidemiology, how it's spreading, what the symptoms are. And now we have moved to a conversation about the economic impact of the measures that we have implemented to mitigate the COVID pandemic. And I was wondering whether you could share your perspectives on that, on what's taking place in our economy, what is going to happen, and then I'll also ask you about the recent budget.
First and foremost, look at Corona being a health issue, a public health issue, but it becomes an economic issue because of the measures which are put to deal with it from the health perspective. And there's a negative relationship between the measures to mitigate the effects of Corona and the spread of Corona through social distancing. Social distancing will obviously work for health, but it will have a negative economic consequence. So because of the social distancing and all these public health regulations, you find that there's a lot of structural changes really happening. A lot of things are being affected by that. First and foremost, social distancing and the traveling cessation, that is international travel cessation, for example, has had a big impact on some sectors. For example, you talk about the tourism, the hospitality sector generally, hotels and tourism sector, that one is at a standstill. If you talk about education like we know it, it is changing. The consumption, the way goods are being produced and consumed is changing. And we expect some of these structural changes to actually continue even after this. I would like to say that before I talk too much, that definitely Corona is, as we know it, has brought about a lot of changes. It's actually a setback to the economy, but definitely it's not a reset. Even after Corona, the world as we know it will not have drastically changed. It will be recognizable, but there's going to be glaring changes that we did not know before. The things we are learning now, the things we are doing now, some of them are going to stay even after Corona.
You mentioned the impact on the hospitality industry, and that has been quite marked. And we've been reading reports of Kenya is heavily dependent on tourism for its a large chunk of its foreign exchange earnings, as we are also very dependent on remittances. There's the sort of analysis that one hears is that the tourism sector, the entire hospitality sector, is going to take quite some time to return to its former levels. And there are those who argue that actually it will not return, simply because, you know, as long as Corona is around, people are afraid to travel. We have this physical distancing underway. The mechanics of the hospitality sector. I visited a couple of restaurants in Nairobi, and one of the striking things is, you know, you're only allowed to sit two at a table. There's the distances between the tables are also large, and so there's still a bit of nervousness about getting out into public. So, are we seeing, you know, changes to our economy that may last quite a bit of time?
Now, let us talk about some hard facts. For example, Corona is going to be here with us probably for the rest of the time. But the epidemiology of the disease changes. Two things will either happen: either we acquire the so-called communal immunity, or we find a vaccine, and that means that then Corona stops. It's here with us, but then it becomes like any other disease that you are living with today, that we have known how to manage and handle it. Why Corona is a bit scaring is because without the vaccine and without exact treatment, then it becomes a big threat to a lot of people. But those are transient. Those characteristics are transient. We expect them to be, once we find we get communal immunity, and or we find a vaccine, the fear of social distancing will end. The fear of contracting Corona will no longer be an issue. Just like we're not scared of getting a flu, and you know that it is there all the time. So the same attitude will prevail. But before then, this is what we are seeing. So now, the tourism sector and whether it will recover and whether things will be the same again. Some of the very low chain tourism sector may go off and not be able to come back. Mm-hmm. Because Corona hit when nobody expected it. Mm-hmm. It hit at the peak of the tourism sector in Kenya. Many of these small enterprises dealing with tourism had actually revamped their businesses. They had bought new expensive vehicles, probably on loan. They had put up some structures to accommodate their customers and clients. Now those are rotting as we speak.
Yes.
And much as the loan will be rescheduled and done and forgiven and not be blacklisted because of the regulations, eventually they'll have to come face to face with that loan. I've not had any bank writing off loans yet.
No.
I've not had that, but I've had all these kind of negotiations and things like that. So those small struggling ones, perhaps they may just be collateral damage.
Wow.
But the bigger ones, the government will not let some essential tourism facilities go to waste. Hospitality infrastructure like the airlines and things like that. The policymakers will interject on the growth-oriented big tourism sector firms because they cannot let them just go under. But the operations may change now and coming. But again, the tourism sector will take long to recover for two reasons. One, people's incomes have been battered. Now, by the time we start planning a holiday, it means that you will have recovered from all the economic battering you have suffered. Maybe you had lost your jobs, you had experienced a pay cut, or probably your all focus changed. Maybe you've seen a lot of luxurious vehicles now selling vegetables and selling groceries from the boot or from the trunk.
That's correct.
It's because people, like, every time I walk in town, at the few times I've walked in town, I've seen pickups parking, those same Prados which will be selling vegetables in the evening. I've seen them being loaded with files and laptops and printers from luxurious office blocks in town. It means that somebody has just closed a consultancy office, somebody has just closed a private business. And so what do I do with this vehicle? I can at least try and survive. People are not selling vegetables from their trunks because they are making money. Rather, they are trying to survive. it's like it's a survival tactic. You need to eat at the end of the day. So really, every time I see this luxurious vehicle selling vehicle, my heart bleeds. Another office is somebody's job. So, and those are the people who are planning for these holidays. Don't forget.
Mm-hmm.
By the time they reorganize themselves and start planning now and setting back the offices, that it takes long to set up an office in town. By the time they recover that and start planning a holiday, that is why now the tourism sector will take longer to recover. It is going to take longer, but surely to start recovering slowly by slowly. We don't expect massive profits from them in the beginning, but slowly by slowly we will see them recovering, but it may take longer.
You mentioned, Daktari, that you haven't heard of any banks writing off loans, and I think the same seems to hold for the entire country. Our debt to GDP ratio has been going up steadily for a number of years now, but we have just taken on a huge amount of new debt. Fortunately, some of it is more concessional. The government is in the middle of is implementing an injection of a huge amount of money into the economy. I'll be keen for your opinion in that regard, in the context of the budget that was read by the minister recently, and how you think that is going to play out given this context of COVID-19 that we're living in.
Let us first acknowledge that the relationship between debt and GDP is not linear in either way. Rather, it is quadratic. That is, it will rise. That is, at low levels of debt, there is positive economic growth, until there's a tipping point for debt, whereby more debt now will start affecting the economy negatively. The tricky bit now, and where many economists don't get it right, is where is our tipping point? Because tipping point are determined by many other things, market imperfections in the economy. An economy like Kenya with very high market imperfections, our tipping point is likely to be much lower than an economy like the US, which is much more frictionless compared to ours. The tipping point is going to be much higher. So the question is, where is Kenya's debt tipping point? And I think that is where the discussions really need to be, because debt on itself, it's not the issue. The issue is, are we taking more than we can chew? And when do we tell the tipping point? Estimators told us that 50% of GDP or 62% of GDP. And for a long time, it was thought like debt levels up to between 50 and 65% of GDP for Kenya, even though 65 is a little bit on the upper side, but that could be possibly accommodated. Anything more than that, according to the estimates on the tipping point, anything more than that for Kenya in particular could have a negative repercussion. That is what we know from the economics. But now we are seeing a lot of debt coming in. Question: if, for me as an economist, my question is, what is it that we can show for this debt? And when we are spending about 40% of our GDP in 12 months, can the economy genuinely accommodate that level of spending? In layman's language, if you go to a villager and you give a villager today 100 million Kenya shillings to spend in 3 months, what constructive activity do you expect that villager to do? In the first place, they don't have the technology, the know-how, the entrepreneurial capacities. They cannot just accommodate that kind of financing. No wonder we are looted left, right, and center. Because every time we try to budget, because all this debt is acquired in the name of financing a budget.
Yes.
These budgets tend to be overinflated, not just for the good of the economy, but for the good of some individuals who have learned that the best way to get your money is simply to overestimate, put a padding for yourself, and that way you won't be caught. You wouldn't, and because no, we are spending within the budget, we are following our budget guidelines, and blah 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 blah. It's going to be harder to be caught. So for me, the question is, all these trillions, when you're budgeting 40% of our GDP to spend in 12 months, is it necessary? And that can only come in if you have serious discussions about our policymakers, about the budget preparements, and a bit of honesty. A bit of honesty. I've always argued that what is lacking in many of these African economies is digitization. Today we have technology that can allow us know, for example, how much money is spent where, and how much this has been procured for, and that data should be accessible to everybody. All these secrecies about finances, for example, all this pretense that we do not have enough technology for enough digitization, it's nonsense. Where would you give social protection, for example, and we cannot quite be able to tell we don't have a system that can be audited even by the public to know who got what from where and how much was budgeted and who got what from there, and their complete identification in a way that should any advocacy organization or should any citizen of Kenya want to know, we sacrifice this much to protect our brothers and sisters who are vulnerable, how many of them caught? And that data should just plug out and be shown to everybody, and the math should just figure. And if you want, just like after we do research and we submit our budgets, it is possible for the donor to call and confirm, did you receive this? Or did they interview you? There is that kind of honesty, and it's very easy. Why is that lacking? Is it deliberate? And as long as that attitude is there, then this debt will always be a concern. Because at the end of the day, you find that if we acquire, you see, the point is, if you go back to the petrodollars in 1970s, that is when the oil producing countries produced a lot of oil.
Yes.
And they had so much money, and they wondered, what do we do with this money? And so they looked around, and the African governments were there, and they're ready. They're like, yeah, give us. And so for them, 10 years looked like it's a long time. We will find a way. So they take all this money without quite exactly thinking what they're going to do with it. But money is always good. They take it, and 10 years come. That was in the 80s, 90s, 10 years come, and they have nothing to show with all that data they took from the petrodollars, from the oil producing countries. And they're told, pay up, pay up, pay up. And these guys can't pay up. They have nothing to show for it. The economies are as good as nothing. Then now we got caught up in the structural adjustment programs, where when these guys tried to push for their money to be paid, and they went through the Bretton Woods institutions. And somehow convinced them these guys are disorganized in the economy. That's why they got so much money, and they can't show anything for it. And so the Bretton Woods institutions take it upon themselves to help us reorganize our economy through the structural adjustment programs, but mainly to make us pay up. Yeah. And when push came to shove, we stood up and said, can't pay, won't pay, HIPIC. Yeah. Highly indebted countries initiative came in. Yeah. And we were correlated to some extent as for these concessional loans, and after that. Now, a couple of years down the line, the same thing is it's happening now with these Chinese loans. Chinese have got surpluses, you know that.
Yes.
And the Chinese are acting out of their surpluses. And of course, in Africa, everywhere you scratch, there's something. Either you'll find a diamond here, or you'll find some tea there. There's always something in Africa. And that has been the envy of the world. And everybody, the whole world is itching to get a piece of Africa. And so what better way? And they have known our weak point, money. They know what we can't resist, unfortunately. So there are all this willingness to give us debts, and you've taken them. So the point is, these debts at the end of the day, are we still giving out Africa for free like we did it during the colonial period? Only that this time we're doing it deliberately with our own sweat and blood.
Yes.
Are we setting up ourselves for an Africa that can never be free? Because at the end of the day, whoever has the money takes a control. At the end of the day, that's a question we want to ask. For how long? Can we just ask ourselves, how much debt? If we think about our freedom, then debt should be a freedom issue. If we want a free Africa, we cannot take away the discussion of debt from freedom. and ask ourselves genuinely, if we are serious about developing our economies, if you're serious about serving our people, how much money can we accommodate? Like the analogy of the poor man and the 100 million. If you want to build a poor man, he doesn't need that at a go. He needs to start smaller amount, acquiring the right tech, the right training, the right know-how, the right equipment. He needs to start with that, and slowly by slowly you can build his debt capacity until he can be able, or rather his financial absorption capacity. Let me talk about that. We can build our financial absorption capacities in such a way that every time we acquire debt, it is debt that is going to be meaningful to our economies, not debt that we take and we steal it. You know, it sounds ridiculous.
Yeah.
We steal from ourselves,
Yes.
but it sounds ridiculous.
And with debt, ironically, we're not only stealing from ourselves, but we're stealing from future generations, because
Yes.
This is money that's going to have to, it's our children who are going to have to pay it. But what is even more striking right now is that we've borrowed quite expensively. And you're very right. Between 1996 and 2006, there was this highly indebted poor countries initiative, which was quite successful. A lot of debt was written off, and now Kenya is considered a middle income country. So we are not, eligible for some of the concessions that the poorer countries are. And yet the government has embarked on a very significant stimulus package to cushion the economy from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. $500 million, and every day the newspapers have news of yet another loan that has been acquired from African Development Bank, World Bank, European Union, etc. And given the context that you've given, which is something that we know that we're not very transparent with this money. We're also fond of stealing it. What needs to change if we're going to turn this coronavirus moment into an opportunity for us to be able to manage our affairs economically in a much more transparent, honest, and manner that is productive to the majority of Kenyan people?
Actually, what is worrying about, it's okay to have a rescue package, a stimulus package, but my economist mind is telling me that's just one piece of the story. Where is the rest of the story? Because we know that in economics, that if you only deal with the supply, the demand, if you only allow people to continue consuming goods and services, and you do not stimulate the production side, we know that we are gearing up for some macro instabilities like inflation. So as it were, we can as well brace up for post-COVID serious inflation unless things change. And how do we expect this to change? Because we want to ask ourselves, what is our biggest supply bottleneck? We're talking about the raw materials, the technology. We are talking about raw materials, technology, and capital equipment. What are we doing to address those? What are we doing to ensure that there is still technology transfer? Because that is where the COVID-19 opportunities will come in for those who care to open our eyes. And Africa is in a good place together, because compared to other economies, African economies have been lesser battered than the Western economies. We expect capital flow from the West to Africa, but only to the countries whose economies have got proper supply infrastructure, which will attract more foreign direct investments. What policies are we putting up to attract capital investments, to attract technology transfers during COVID-19? Because that's what the opportunity is. And to make sure that now we build the supply of goods and services to complement these other demand dynamics that you're building to the system. So as long as you're not talking about supply capacities and you're not talking about how to attract the foreign direct investments and the policies to ensure that FDI really leaves us better than we were. We know that FDI is just a necessary, but it's not sufficient condition. It's necessary because you need to grow the pie before you talk about redistribution. So FDI will only help us grow the pie, which is important. But is that pie going to be feeding us as Kenyans, or is it going to be feeding them? Now that is where we fail. So even as we talk about FDI, we should think that that's a necessary condition for growth, but it's not sufficient, because like we always say, development economies are not very much thrilled about the numbers. It's about what those numbers mean in terms of people's welfare, education, health, and overall well-being. So as what policies are we done that, even as we talk about attracting FDI? So for me, that is where the opportunity for COVID-19 will happen. But if it were now, we can as well brace for post-COVID inflation. Just like, because every quantitative easing moment in history, unless it has been matched by proper supply dynamics, it has always ended up in very, very bad inflation. Yeah.
Let me change tact a little bit and ask you about you teach at the Nairobi University, and we've been seeing some distress expressed in many of our institutions of higher learning. We've seen advertisements of salaries being slashed, and other changes taking place, because obviously this contraction of demand has affected everybody. So I wanted to ask how it's affecting you, say at the economics department of the University of Nairobi, and how this might be mitigated. But more broadly, what does it tell us? One of the things that has been striking about our institutions of higher learning has been a very dramatic expansion of parallel programs. And I've never seen more, it's been a unique phenomena in Kenya of our universities going into the real estate business in a very major way. I once visited the law campus of one university, which is behind the law campus of another one. And so I asked myself, okay, our universities have gone on a spending spree. They are very big in real estate, and so what kind of condition are you in now with this large major contraction of demand? How are you coping, and what lessons are we learning?
Mr. Githonko, your CV about the university is a bit old. Yes, universities parallel degrees were cash cows.
Okay.
But you know what happened when Matiang'i became the education CS, cabinet secretary during Matiang'i era? He put stringent measures in terms of the examination management. And that means that all these many grades, A's and B's, that students were scoring and fighting for university slots, the idea of parallel programs was to get all this money within the country. Don't go to India, don't go where, just come here. And so, of course, fueled with what you call diploma disease, a discussion for another day, whereby everybody thinks that getting a degree is your ticket to a good life, but that's another discussion. Fueled with that phenomena, what you call a diploma disease phenomena, and people started cheating in exams, and all these people getting university entry grades, and they could not be accommodated in the institution. So we took the opportunity to have all these parallel degrees and parallel programs, and indeed money was coming in, and universities did many, many things, including University of Nairobi built a tower without any debt. The University of Nairobi tower, no debt.
No debt.
That is no debt. That is parallel money. But that was then. When Matiang'i came and he put regulation about exams, there were not enough students even to fill up the slots for the public universities, leave alone the private. No, there were not enough. There were not enough students. So who will pay for an education if you can get it for free and with a loan, if you can get it with a subsidized rate from the government, and join the University of Nairobi, which is still the leading university?
Yes.
You get it?
Yes.
So all those parallel programs, even up to today, we are no longer able to run as lucrative programs as those because of the examination management at high school, which has meant that now we are no longer seeing so many people acquiring the university entry grades. Remember, it's not okay. It's not allowed by law to admit somebody for a degree program if they do not attain the university entry grade. So that has meant that all these module 2 monies have gone.
Yes.
But still talking about now the COVID-19 and universities, we were caught flat-footed.
Yes.
We were called as, despite all this, you can always ask, what did the Module 2 monies mean to lecturers themselves, as me as a lecturer? The Module 2 money did not get me a laptop to use in the office, just as a normal classroom lecturer. It did not get me a laptop. It did not get me classroom technology that really matters for me. It did not get me, it didn't mean much in terms of the teaching itself. It could have meant something else in terms of university infrastructure and all that, but in terms of the actual delivery of the job and the lecturers and the students, it did not quite build on that. So we were caught flat-footed, whereby the first time our lecturers, so we teach online. What are you going to use? Who has laptop? Who has what? Yes. So, that discussion is somehow, people have learned that if you don't teach, it's your course that is whatever. So people have had to implement on that. What about our students? We have students from all over Kenya. In the furthest corner of this country, talk about Lamu, Turkana, and everywhere, the remotest areas, we take them. Even areas without network coverage, those are our students. As a lecturer, I have learned that teaching is my job, and I cannot sit back and teach. So I have tried, the university gave us data from telecom network, about 10 GB of data, everybody in a card. It's supposed to be renewable. And that's what we've received. Of course, I've got to come up with ways to make that data work for me, get a laptop and all that kind of a thing. But then, even when we have the online classes, not everybody is able to log in. Because like, if you talk about the School of Economics, economics is one of the premier courses in the faculty, in the College of Humanities, for example. And we have class sizes of up to 500 students, 300, yeah. The smallest class at the School of Economics will be 340. The moment you combine it with the private students who we have integrated, since they are not enough to form whatever, we have tried to integrate them with the normal regular students. The moment you combine them with our regular students, then we get numbers of about 400, 500. If you have an online class on a good day, out of those, I'm going to have at least 80, no more than 100. But even that 100, some will be coming in and dropping out, and like that. So on average, this will start for me from the beginning to the end. It's going to be about 80 students. You start a discussion with the class representative on what is happening to your colleagues, and some, they are not reachable, they are out of network and things like that. So the digital divide, there are students who are highly marginalized, because even if you give them the data, whatever, and telecom does not cover the whole country, what does that really mean to them?
Yes.
Even a student from a poor family, a laptop may be a big luxury. So there are all these kind of, because our students are not if you talk about the situation to USIU, for example, the experience is different, because then they take children of another different background of high levels of livelihoods. All these gadgets are normal and they live within network coverages. But for us, we take students from all over. So and they are completely different. So the digital divide. And what I learned is that I remember one time I had a talk with one of our student leaders on phone, and she told me, "Mwalimu, you are being ridiculous. Why don't you ask me to just stay alive and come back to school after COVID? Where are you burdening me?" That's what she asked me. And she told me, "Why don't you just ask me stay alive and come back? Because even staying alive is a challenge." She told me that even staying alive is not obvious for some of us. So our point was, depending on what level you are of the digital divide, it's not about being told this is free internet, go and use it. There are much more pressing issues to you, like how do you earn a livelihood? How do you find the handhill that has got the better network? Because she told me, like, where some of our students live, you've got to climb on a handhill, or you have to go to climb on a tree just to make a call.
Yes.
Leave alone to find a place whereby you can sit down and connect all these sophisticated, luxurious gadgets and listen to Dr. Joy from our living room giving a lecture. That is pure luxury. Mwalimu, let me just stay alive. So there are all these kind of experiences that we've had, mainly because our students are from all over Kenya. So what are we talking about? As a country, the point is, unfortunately, online learning is one of the things that is going to stick. Travel is going to be people have realized that, like, for example, those whose jobs are travel intensive, there are people who simply have got suitcases packed all the time because they just change anytime you are traveling and things like that. They've just realized that they don't have to do that all the time. They can have those meetings from the comfort of their homes.
Yes.
They can have these online meetings and they work and realize that they actually work. No, I would have come to your office to do this before COVID.
Yes.
But here we are, and you're doing it very well.
Yes.
So these are some of the things which are going to stay. Same as online learning. People have realized that actually, if you can learn online, if New York is offering degrees to American, or if Harvard is offering degrees to, is still teaching online and those degrees are still as good, then why don't I register and learn here? So even our universities, unfortunately, online learning is going to remain, and those who will not embrace it even after post-COVID, they're going to lose out. So we are calling for government and the policymakers and anyone to enable that. Internet is no longer a luxury.
Okay.
It is a basic, it is one of the basic survival tools for any economy now. And post-COVID, the digital, those who have got more digital access will continue advancing faster than those without.
Yes.
So, but unfortunately, you cannot start bringing people internet and they don't have food. They'll vandalize the wires,
Yes.
even if to connect some Juakali stuff. So poverty reduction in remote areas and job creation in remote areas so that they can appreciate this infrastructure. Why do people vandalize road equipment like this metals or like this steel, that whatever? It's because they don't appreciate it. They're looking at it, we slept hungry, and they start metal lying there. Let's remove it. So you have to bring people's livelihoods higher so that you can be able to bring them internet. You want to make sense to them. And so the job in Africa is not yet done. And especially in Kenya, in the remote areas, it's not yet done, and we need to get there as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Dr. I know we're running out of time. I had one final question, which is again to do with the academy and for experts and academics, intellectuals like yourself, who are still continuing with your jobs, you're teaching. How are the how are you managing the constraints within your own context? You've been very articulate in describing this digital divide, and so you say only from what you're saying, you've lost sometimes up to 2/3 of your students who the ones who are from outside Nairobi who don't have access to the internet. And I liked your saying that they have to look for the highest anthill to be able to log into to listen to Dr. Kiiru's lecture. But for you now, under lockdown, you're an academic, you need to do research, you need access not only to your books and other material that is essential to what you do, but you also need interaction with your colleagues who are part of teams. But you're now working from home. How has that disruption also impacted you now, just as a researcher and as an intellectual in the field of economics here in Kenya?
The truth is, first and foremost, our careers work for us as people. So we've gone out of our way to use our own personal resources to make it comfortable for us to work from our homes. If I don't do research, and if I don't keep my research network going, first I will not earn a promotion, and my university does not have all the money to fund all my research. So it's my career that's going to suffer at the end of the day.
Yes.
Realizing that many of us have just come up with our own personal resources to enable ourselves. Like you just repump your own office with using your own resources. Don't wait for the university to buy you a laptop, a computer, a printer, or provide all your internet needs. No. You cannot afford to do that because you're going to suffer first and foremost as a person. So most of us have just done that, but the university is supporting us in a way that I don't have to go to the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research to tell him, oh, give me this, I want to apply for this. We can be able to do all these things online. We can access our university library online. And yes, the university has really, some of the things that will keep continuing, the bureaucracies have actually reduced with COVID. You see, before when papers used to move from one office and somebody takes a whole day, 2 days to sign a paper, that's gone. And I think post-COVID, nobody's going to go back to that.
Well done.
That you've learned that we can get things done online. So that's one of the things that has really happened, that all these things can actually be moved online with a lot of speed, can even be able to track and things like that. So those are some of the things that the university have been able to embrace well. What has not worked very well for the university, and which is not really a fault of the university, is a fault of the country structure, is reaching our students. It's not our fault that you have students in Turkana, in very remote areas with no network coverages, even for making a call. It's not our fault as a university, but that's where we find ourselves. We'd like to teach our students online, which now our lecturers have realized, you better do this, otherwise you're going to lose your job.
Yes.
So people have put on their own resources to teach. They're not saying, look, we are paying you, we're even paying your transport allowances, and you still say that you cannot afford a smartphone to deliver a lecture? You must be kidding me. You are not worth being here. So everybody has told the line. In terms of us, you have told the line. But what about our students?
Yeah.
And that's not really our fault. And even if we continue teaching, we still believe that some of the things we've taught online, they must be retaught again post-COVID, because not, if you are teaching less than 2/3 of your students, depending on what department you are in, and depending on where your students are, I think it's just unfair to assume that I taught this online.
Yes.
It's just unfair to assume that. Of course, courses like engineering, medicine, I don't know how much of the practical stuff can be done online again.
Yes.
So there are all this kind of, when it comes, yeah, we are teaching, but I don't think it's comprehensive for all our students, given the nature and the diversity of them. But the university as a university is doing the best they can. Believe me, everything has moved online.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Joy Mueni Kiiru, Senior Lecturer at the University of Nairobi at the School of Economics. Thank you so much for giving us your time this morning. Very grateful. I want to book that I'll be coming back to you again, so that we can, as this develops and some of the structural changes that you're talking about begin to play out, we'll be very, very keen for more of your wisdom, insights, and perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was my pleasure.